I stood in front of the full-length mirror, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time. The reflection staring back at me was a far cry from the scared, broken woman I'd been just a few years ago. Max's voice drifted up from downstairs, reminding me we'd be late if I didn't hurry. "Coming, honey," I called back, taking a deep breath. Tonight was important, our first dinner with his mother since we'd gotten married. I'd only met Marianne once before, at the wedding, and her piercing gaze had left me feeling like I'd been dissected. As I descended the stairs, Max's face lit up. "You look beautiful, Leah," he said, pulling me in for a kiss. I relaxed into his embrace, savoring the feeling of safety and love, something I'd never truly known before him. "Thanks," I murmured. "I just hope your mother approves." Max chuckled. "Don't worry about her. She'll love you once she gets to know you." If only I'd known then how wrong he was. The drive to Marianne's sprawling Victorian home was quiet, my stomach churning with nerves. As we pulled up, I noticed the meticulously manicured lawn and the gleaming Mercedes in the driveway. "Ready?" Max asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, plastering on a smile, as I'll ever be. Marianne answered the door herself, perfectly coiffed and wearing a string of pearls that probably cost more than our car. "Maxwell, darling," she cooed, air-kissing his cheeks. Her gaze slid to me, and I swore the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Leah, how? Nice to see you again." "Thank you for having us, Marianne," I said, willing my voice not to shake. She ushered us inside, and I marveled at the opulent decor. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of stern-faced men and women staring down at us. "Dinner's nearly ready," Marianne announced. "Maxwell, why don't you pour us some wine?" As Max headed to the bar cart, Marianne turned to me. "So, Leah," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "tell me about your family. What does your father do?" I swallowed hard. He works in construction. My mom's a teacher." Marianne's lips thinned. "How quaint. And you? What is it you do again?" "I'm a social worker," I replied, lifting my chin. "I help families in crisis." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it." Max returned with our drinks, oblivious to the tension. "What are we talking about?" "Oh, just getting to know your lovely wife better," Marianne said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Did you know her father's in construction, dear? Isn't that fascinating?" I saw a flicker of discomfort cross Max's face, but he quickly covered it. "Leah's family is wonderful, Mother. You'd like them if you met them," Marianne hummed noncommittally. "Well, shall we eat?" Throughout dinner, Marianne peppered me with questions about my background, each one feeling like a subtle jab. I answered as politely as I could, but my patience was wearing thin. "So when can we expect some grandchildren?" Marianne asked suddenly, setting down her fork. I choked on my wine. "I'm sorry?" "Children, dear. Surely you two are planning on starting a family soon?" "Maxwell isn't getting any younger, you know." Max cleared his throat. "Mother, we've only been married a few months. There's plenty of time for that." Marianne's eyes narrowed. "Nonsense. The Caldwell name needs to be carried on. You do want children, don't you, Leah?" I felt trapped, all eyes on me. "We haven't really discussed it yet," I managed. "Well, you'd better get to it," Marianne said sharply. "A woman your age, fertility doesn't last forever." "Mother," Max warned, but the damage was done. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me," I muttered, fleeing to the bathroom. As I splashed cold water on my face, I stared at my reflection. What had I gotten myself into? Max had seemed so different from the men in my past, kind, supportive, loving. But now, faced with his mother's clear disdain, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. A soft knock at the door startled me. "Leah?" Max called. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It was time to have a serious talk with my husband about where we stood and what kind of future we really had together. The weeks following that disastrous dinner with Marianne were tense. Max and I tiptoed around each other, the elephant in the room growing larger by the day. I knew we needed to talk, but every time I tried to broach the subject, Max found an excuse to change the topic or leave the room. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when Max's phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced over, not meaning to pry, but the name on the screen made my blood run cold. Mother. Before I could look away, the message preview popped up. "Have you talked to Leah about children yet? Time is running out." My hands shook as I set down the shirt I'd been folding. Max, I called out, my voice sharper than I'd intended. He appeared in the doorway, a wary expression on his face. What's wrong? I pointed to his phone. Care to explain why your mother is texting you about our reproductive plans? Max's face paled. He snatched up the phone, quickly reading the message. Leah, I can explain. Please do, I said, crossing my arms. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and your mother have been discussing our private life behind my back. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. It's not like that. She's just concerned. Concerned? I echoed incredulously. Max, she's obsessed. And you're enabling her. She means well, he protested weakly. She just wants us to be happy. I laughed. A bitter sound. Happy? You think pressuring me into having a baby I'm not ready for will make me happy? Max's expression hardened. And when will you be ready, Leah? We're not getting any younger. Don't you want a family? His words hit me like a slap. Of course I do, I said quietly, but on our terms, not your mother's. My mother has nothing to do with this, Max insisted, but I could see the lie in his eyes. Really? Then why is she texting you about it? Why are you discussing our personal decisions with her at all? Max's jaw clenched. She's family, Leah. She has a right to know. No, I cut him off. She doesn't. This is between you and me, or at least it should be. We stared at each other for a long moment, the gulf between us widening with each passing second. Finally, Max spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Maybe my mother's right. Maybe you're not the right person to carry on the Caldwell name after all. I recoiled as if he'd struck me. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said slowly, that I'm starting to wonder if I made a mistake marrying someone so different from us. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt my world tilting on its axis, everything I thought I knew about my husband crumbling before my eyes. Get out, I whispered. Max blinked. What? Get out, I shouted, grabbing the nearest object, a framed photo of our wedding day, and hurling it at him. It shattered against the wall as he ducked. I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here. For a moment, I thought he might argue, but then he nodded stiffly, grabbing his keys and wallet. I'll stay at my mother's tonight, he said. We can talk tomorrow when we've both calmed down. As the front door slammed behind him, I sank to the floor, surrounded by the remnants of our broken picture frame. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? And more importantly, what was I going to do now? My phone buzzed, and I reached for it mechanically. A text from Marianne flashed across the screen. Max told me what happened. You're making a big mistake, dear. Come over tomorrow, and we'll sort this all out. I stared at the message, a cold fury building in my chest. No more playing nice, no more trying to please everyone. It was time to stand up for myself, even if it meant losing everything I thought I wanted. With shaking fingers, I typed out a reply. Stay out of my marriage, Marianne. This is your only warning. As I hit send, I knew I'd just declared war. And I had no idea if I was ready for the battle ahead. The weeks after my confrontation with Max were a blur of tense silences and forced politeness. We'd reached an uneasy truce, but the weight of unspoken words hung heavy between us. I knew we were both waiting for the other shoe to drop. It finally did on a crisp autumn morning. I was sipping my coffee when Max cleared his throat, setting down his newspaper with an air of forced casualness. Leah, he began, his voice carefully neutral. I've been thinking, maybe we should see a fertility specialist. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Max leaned forward, his eyes earnest. It's been months, and we're not getting any younger. I just think it might be wise to explore our options. The unspoken pressure from Marianne hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I set my mug down with a sharp clank. Max, we agreed to wait. I'm not ready. When will you be ready? He interrupted, frustration seeping into his tone. We can't put this off forever, Leah. Don't you want a family? His words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. Of course I do, but on our terms, not your mother's. Max's jaw clenched. This isn't about my mother. This is about us, our future. I laughed bitterly. Is it? Because it feels an awful lot like it's about appeasing Marianne and her obsession with continuing the Caldwell line. That's not fair, Max protested, but I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. Isn't it? I challenged. Then why the sudden urgency? Why can't we just let things happen naturally? Max ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of his agitation. Because we don't have the luxury of time. Look, I've already made an appointment with Dr. Reeves. She's the best fertility specialist in the city. I felt like I'd been slapped. You what? Without even discussing it with me first? I knew you'd react like this, Max said, his voice rising. That's why I didn't tell you. Sometimes, Leah, you need a little push. A push, I echoed incredulously. This isn't a push, Max. This is a shove off a cliff. We glared at each other across the kitchen table, the distance between us seeming to grow with each passing second. Finally, I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain steady. Fine, I said. I'll go to the appointment. Max's face lit up. Really? Leah, that's wonderful. I held up a hand, silencing him. I'm not finished. I'll go, but on one condition. Your mother stays out of this. Completely. No more discussions about our private life. No more helpful suggestions. This is between you and me. Agreed? Max hesitated, and I saw the struggle play out across his face. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. The appointment was set for the following week. As I sat in Dr. Reeves' sterile office, listening to her explain the battery of tests we'd need to undergo, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of my own life. Max, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with enthusiasm. He peppered the doctor with questions about success rates and treatment options, while I sat in numb silence. As we left the clinic, a wave of nausea hit me. I barely made it to a nearby trash can before emptying the contents of my stomach. Leah, Max exclaimed, rushing to my side. Are you all right? I wiped my mouth, a strange calm settling over me. I'm fine, I said. Just a bit of nerves, I guess. But as Max helped me to the car, chattering excitedly about next steps, a realization dawned on me. The nausea, the fatigue I'd been feeling lately, it couldn't be. Could it? I placed a hand on my stomach, a mix of fear and wonder coursing through me. If I was right, everything was about to change, and I had no idea if I was ready for what was coming. As we pulled into our driveway, I turned to Max, my heart pounding. We need to talk, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think I might be pregnant. The day of our 20-week ultrasound arrived with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Max and I had barely spoken about the pregnancy, tiptoeing around each other like strangers sharing a house. As we sat in the waiting room, I could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell? The technician called, her smile bright and oblivious to the undercurrent between us. We followed her into the dimly lit room, and I settled onto the exam table. Max stood awkwardly by my side, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Are you ready to see your baby? The technician asked cheerfully. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As she spread the cold gel on my stomach, I reached for Max's hand out of habit. He hesitated for a moment before taking it, his grip loose and uncomfortable. The room filled with the rapid whoosh-whoosh of our baby's heartbeat. Despite everything, tears sprang to my eyes. That's our baby, I whispered, glancing at Max. His face was unreadable, eyes fixed on the grainy image on the screen. Is everything normal? He asked, his voice tight. The technician nodded, moving the wand across my belly. Everything looks perfect. Would you like to know the gender? I felt Max stiffen beside me. We hadn't discussed whether we wanted to find out, but suddenly I needed to know. Yes, I said firmly, squeezing Max's hand. We'd like to know. The technician smiled, adjusting the image. Congratulations, you're having a little girl. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A girl. My daughter. I felt a surge of love so powerful it took my breath away, but Max's hand had gone limp in mine. I turned to look at him, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. Disappointment, anger, maybe even disgust? A girl? He repeated, his voice flat. The technician, sensing the shift in mood, quickly wrapped up the appointment. As we left the clinic, the silence between us was deafening. In the car, I couldn't hold back anymore. Max, talk to me. What's going on? He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. It's nothing. I guess I was hoping for a boy. Hoping? Max, this is our child, our daughter. How can you be disappointed? He sighed heavily. You don't understand, Leah. In my family, the firstborn has always been a son. It's tradition. It's expected. I felt like I'd been slapped. Expected? By who? Your mother? Max's jaw clenched. This isn't about my mother. It's about carrying on the Caldwell name, the legacy. Stop the car, I said quietly. What? I said, stop the car! I shouted. Max pulled over and I fumbled with my seatbelt, desperate for air. As I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, Max called after me, "Leah, where are you going?" I whirled to face him, fury and heartbreak warring inside me. "How dare you," I hissed. "How dare you taint this moment, this miracle, with your outdated sexist expectations? This is our daughter, Max, a living, breathing part of both of us. And if you can't see how precious that is, then maybe we've made a terrible mistake." Max's face paled. "Leah, you don't mean that. Come on, let's go home and talk about this." But I was already backing away, shaking my head. I can't go back to that house, not right now. I need time to think." As I turned and walked away, I heard Max call out behind me, his voice tinged with panic. But I didn't look back. My hand rested protectively on my stomach, where my daughter, my perfect, beautiful daughter, was growing. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. The life I thought I wanted, the future I had planned with Max, it was all crumbling around me. And as the first tears began to fall, I realized I had a choice to make, one that would determine not just my future, but my daughter's as well. I spent the night at my parents' house, ignoring the constant buzzing of my phone as Max tried to reach me. By morning, I felt hollowed out but resolute. I had to face this head-on. When I returned home, Max was waiting, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "Leah, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean." I held up a hand, silencing him. "We need to talk, but not now. Your mother's coming over, isn't she?" Max nodded, looking sheepish. "I told her about the baby. She insisted on coming." My stomach clenched, but I steeled myself. "Fine, let's get this over with." Marianne arrived like a storm, bursting through our front door without knocking. Her eyes locked onto me immediately, narrowing as they took in my protective stance, one hand resting on my barely there bump. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "I hear congratulations are in order. Though I can't say I'm not disappointed." I felt Max tense beside me, but to my surprise he spoke up. "Mother, please, this is our child we're talking about." Marianne waved him off, her gaze never leaving me. "Don't be naive, Maxwell. This girl will never be able to carry on the Caldwell name properly. You know what needs to be done." The room went deathly quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face as her words sank in. "What are you saying, Marianne?" She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "There are ways, you know, discreet clinics that can take care of this little problem. No one would ever have to know." I recoiled, bile rising in my throat. "You can't be serious. This is your grandchild." "A granddaughter." Marianne spat the word like a curse. "What use is that to our family? No, it's better to start over. Try again for a proper heir." I turned to Max, desperate for his support, but the conflict on his face made my heart sink. "Max," I whispered, pleading. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Maybe we should consider all our options, Leah." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I stumbled back, putting distance between myself and these strangers wearing the faces of my husband and mother-in-law. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marianne smirked, triumphant. "Now, dear, let's not be hasty." "I said get out!" I screamed, my composure shattering. "Both of you. How dare you come into my home and suggest I murder my child, my daughter?" Max reached for me, his face pale. "Leah, please, we're just talking." I jerked away from his touch. "No, Max, we're done talking. I want you both out of this house right now." Marianne drew herself up, indignant. "You can't speak to us this way. Maxwell, control your wife!" But Max seemed frozen, torn between his mother and me. In that moment, seeing his indecision, something inside me broke. "If you won't leave, I will," I said, my voice eerily calm. I grabbed my purse and keys, moving towards the door. "Where are you going?" Max called after me, panic edging into his voice. I paused at the threshold, one hand on my stomach, the other on the doorknob. Somewhere safe. Somewhere my daughter will be loved and valued no matter what. As I walked out, leaving them stunned in my wake, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The decision I'd been struggling with had suddenly become crystal clear. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Max in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway looking lost. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. My focus was on the road ahead, on the future I needed to secure for myself and my daughter. Whatever it took, I would protect her, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I wanted. With tears streaming down my face, I drove towards an uncertain future. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the next week at my parents' house, ignoring Max's constant calls and messages. My mom hovered anxiously, while my dad muttered about teaching that boy a lesson. But I needed time to think, to plan my next move. On the 8th day, a text from Max finally broke through my defenses. "Please, Leah, we need to talk. I'll meet you anywhere." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, the park where we had our first date. As I approached our old favorite bench, I saw Max pacing, looking haggard and sleep-deprived. "Leah," he breathed, relief washing over his face. "I've been so worried." I sat down, keeping my distance. "Say what you need to say, Max." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I've been a coward, letting my mother dictate our lives. But I've had time to think, and I know what's important now. You and our daughter. That's all that matters." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the memory of his silence in the face of Marianne's cruelty still stung. "Words are easy, Max. But when it mattered most, you didn't stand up for us." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But please give me a chance to make it right. I've told my mother she's no longer welcome in our lives unless she can accept our family as it is." I felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by suspicion. "And how did she take that?" Max's face darkened. "Not well. She threatened to cut me off, to write me out of the will. But I don't care about any of that. I only care about you and our baby." I stood up, needing to move to think. "I don't know if I can trust you, Max. How do I know this isn't just another attempt to placate me?" He reached for my hand, his eyes pleading. "Come home with me. Let me prove it to you. I've changed the locks, blocked my mother's number. Our house is ours again. No more interference, no more pressure." Against my better judgment, I let him lead me to his car. The drive home was tense, filled with unspoken words and lingering doubts. As we pulled into our driveway, I felt a sense of unease. Something was off. Max fumbled with his keys, muttering about the new locks, when suddenly the front door swung open. Marianne stood there, her face a mask of righteous fury. "So," she spat, "the prodigal daughter-in-law returns." I whirled on Max, betrayal burning in my chest. "You said—" "I didn't know," Max protested, genuine shock on his face. "Mother, how did you get in here?" Marianne waved a key, smirking. "I had a copy made, of course. Did you really think you could shut me out of my son's life so easily?" I backed away, my hand instinctively covering my stomach. "I'm leaving. This was a mistake." Max grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Leah, wait. This isn't what I wanted. I swear." Marianne advanced, her voice dripping with false concern. "Now, dear, let's not be hasty. We're all family here. We only want what's best for you and the child." The way she said child sent chills down my spine. I jerked away from Max, my heart pounding. "Stay away from me. Both of you." As I turned to run, I saw something in Marianne's hand. A syringe? My blood ran cold as realization dawned. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was about eliminating the problem entirely. "Max!" I screamed, terror gripping me. "Do something." But Max stood frozen, torn between his mother and his wife, indecision paralyzing him once again. In that moment, I knew with sickening clarity that I was truly alone. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted to protect myself and my daughter, I would have to do it myself. With a surge of adrenaline, I shoved past Marianne and ran, my only thought to get as far away from this nightmare as possible. Behind me, I heard Max calling my name, but I didn't look back. This time I was done with second chances. It was time to save myself. I stumbled into my parents' house, gasping for air, my heart pounding. My mom rushed to me, her face etched with concern. "Leah, honey, what happened?" Through sobs, I recounted the horrifying scene at Max's house. My dad's face darkened with each word, his fists clenching at his sides. "That's it," he growled. "I'm calling the police." "No," I cried, grabbing his arm. "We can't. Not yet. I need help." That's when my mom mentioned Paul. "Remember Paul Hawkins? He's a lawyer now, specializing in family law. Maybe he could help." The name stirred something in my memory, a kind smile, a steadfast presence from my youth. I nodded, desperate for any lifeline. "Call him, please." Paul arrived within the hour, his familiar face now etched with lines of experience and concern. As soon as he saw me, his professional demeanor softened. Leah, he said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I promise we're going to fight for you and your daughter. Over the next few days, Paul became my rock. We pored over legal documents, building a case not just for divorce, but for a restraining order against both Max and Marianne. Paul's quiet strength and unwavering support gave me the courage to face what lay ahead. We need to move fast, Paul explained one evening, his voice tight with urgency. Max's family has connections. If we don't act now, they might try to manipulate the system. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. What do we do? Paul leaned forward, his eyes intense. We go on the offensive. I've gathered evidence of Marianne's threats, Max's complicity. We'll file for emergency custody and a protection order. But Leah, he paused, taking my hand, are you ready for what comes next? This won't be easy. I placed my other hand over my growing belly, feeling a fierce protectiveness surge through me. I have to be ready. For her. The next morning, as Paul and I prepared to leave for the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a message from Max. Please, Leah, don't do this. We can work it out. For the sake of our family. I showed Paul the message, my hands shaking. He frowned, reading it twice before looking up at me. This could be a trap, Leah. We need to be careful. But something in Max's words tugged at my heart. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped for reconciliation, for the family I dreamed of. I need to see him, I said, my voice barely a whisper. One last time, to look him in the eye and know for sure. Paul's face tightened with concern. Leah, it's not safe. Let me handle this legally. No, I interrupted, a sudden clarity washing over me. I need to do this. For closure, for strength. I need to face him on my terms. After a long moment, Paul nodded reluctantly. All right, but I'm coming with you, and we do this my way. Controlled environment, witnesses present. As we drove to the agreed-upon meeting place, a busy cafe in the center of town, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment that would define my future, my daughter's future. We entered the cafe, and I saw Max immediately. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. As I approached, flanked by Paul and my pair, Max stood, reaching out to me. Leah, please. But before he could finish, the cafe door burst open. Marianne stormed in, her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little tramp, she screeched, lunging towards me. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I saw Paul move to intercept her, saw my father step protectively in front of me. But it was Max's reaction that froze me in place. He stood there, paralyzed once again, torn between his mother and his wife. And in his indecision, I saw my future laid bare. As chaos erupted around us, I made my choice. No more wavering, no more second chances. It was time to fight for the life my daughter deserved, with or without Max by my side. The cafe erupted into chaos. Marianne's shriek cut through the air as she lunged at me, her eyes wild with rage. Paul moved swiftly, placing himself between us, while my father pulled me back protectively. That's enough, Paul's voice boomed, silencing the room. He turned to Max, who stood frozen, his face a mask of indecision. Control your mother, or I'll have her arrested for assault. Max finally snapped out of his stupor, grabbing Marianne's arm. Mother, stop this! You're making a scene. But Marianne was beyond reason. She wrenched free from Max's grip, her finger pointing accusingly at me. You'll regret this, Leah. I'll make sure you never see a penny of the Caldwell fortune. You and that abomination you're carrying. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. I felt a surge of strength course through me, fueled by anger and a fierce protectiveness for my unborn daughter. I stepped forward, my voice steady and clear. Listen carefully, Marianne, because I'm only going to say this once. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you or your family. What I want is for you to stay away from me and my child. Forever. I turned to Max, my heart breaking even as I spoke the words I knew I had to say. And you, Max. I loved you. I thought we had a future together, but I see now that you'll never be strong enough to stand up to her, to stand up for us. Max's face crumpled. Leah, please. I can change. We can work this out. No, I interrupted, my resolve strengthening with each word. We can't. I won't raise my daughter in a home where she's seen as less than, where her worth is determined by her gender. She deserves better. I deserve better. Paul stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, I have here a set of divorce papers and a restraining order. I strongly suggest you sign them now, or we'll be forced to take this matter to court. And I assure you, you don't want the details of your behavior made public." Marianne sputtered, her face red with fury. But Max, to my surprise, seemed to deflate. He looked at me, then at his mother, and for the first time I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Enough, Mother," he said quietly. "It's over." With shaking hands, Max took the papers from Paul and signed them. Marianne wailed in protest, but Max silenced her with a look. "We've lost, Mother. It's time to let go." As they left the cafe, Max paused at the door, looking back at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Leah. I hope you find happiness." And then they were gone. The tension in the room dissipated, leaving me feeling drained but strangely light. Paul turned to me, his eyes filled with concern and something else I couldn't quite name. "Are you okay?" I nodded, placing a hand on my belly. "We're okay, both of us." As we left the cafe, surrounded by the protective circle of Paul and my parents, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt hope. Paul squeezed my hand gently. "You were incredible in there, Leah. Your daughter is lucky to have you as her mother." I smiled, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Thank you, Paul, for everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." He looked at me intently, his voice soft but sure. "You're stronger than you know, Leah. You would have found a way, but I'm glad I could be here for you." As we walked into the sunlight, I felt a kick from my daughter, as if she was affirming my choices. I laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. "What is it?" Paul asked, smiling at my sudden mirth. "Nothing," I said, grinning. "Just thinking about the future, our future." And as we drove away, leaving the cafe and all it represented behind, I felt a sense of excitement building. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the journey. With my daughter by my side and friends like Paul to support me, I knew we could face anything. The battle was over and we had won. Now it was time to start living.